Good evening. My name is Ajuri Ngelale, and you are most welcome to Africa's Future Leaders. This week on the program, we are taking you all access into the YALI network. While only 1,000 young Africans are selected to participate in the Mandela Washington Fellowship each year, thousands more are accommodated in the Young African Leaders Initiative network across 4 regional hubs on the continent. How does this work, and who is able to link up with the YALI network? These are just a few of the questions for which we seek the answers ahead on the program. So come along with us as we go in to explore and better understand what the YALI network is all about. It is a busy afternoon for a select group of young African leaders in Nairobi, the Kenyan capital. Gathering from East and Central African nations at what is known as a regional leadership center, we pay a visit to know more about the YALI network. Hello, David. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Closest behind.
Sure. So this is the Regional Leadership Center?
Yes, it is. For
Fantastic.
East Africa, serving 14 countries in the region.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Communications manager.
I'm Susan. Nice to meet you.
Ajuri.
Yeah. Welcome to the center.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Would you like to walk around?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's
start
do
from
it.
this side.
Okay. David Kamau heads the center in Nairobi.
We have 90 participants at a time, coming from 14 countries in the region, East and Central Africa, between the ages of 18 and 35.
Okay.
Right. And when they're here, they're organized along 3 tracks. So business and entrepreneurship, public management, and civic leadership. Now what we have here is 2 different classrooms, which I'd like to show you. So after going through 11 weeks of training, they're here now for their final week. Now we're making a slight transition in the structure from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. So these particular participants have been away for the past 8 weeks working on the project virtually, and now they are back. So now they consider the small groups and finalizing their projects before they make their final presentations later this week. Now this particular room is sponsored by one of the largest banks in the region, and this is where the business participants have their classes. Now, as you can see the way the setup is, it's very innovative, very creative, very inspiring, and that's the idea. The idea was for the participants to come into a space that sort of just blows their mind, you know, where they are really inspired to think creatively, create solutions.
Expand.
Yeah, expand their horizons and really get network.
David, one of the very interesting things I've seen in these rooms is the level of interaction between the YALI alumni. Can you talk a little bit about how this place has been designed, specifically kind of purposed for that kind of mutual engagement?
And that's a good question, and it actually brings us to this space that we're in right now. I mean, you can look and see this is a lounge where our participants like to just hang out and sit and have conversations. And what we tried to do with the space was to create the entire space to support that type of engagement. So we've got all these lounges and sitting space, and when you walk further down, you'll see there are several booths that the participants can sit and engage in.
I see. Okay. Okay.
But more than that, we also have the program being very experiential and very practical. So it's all about how can we learn these practical skills that we can take and translate into our everyday life immediately. So it's not about theory and high-level academic resources, but it's about what practical tips and skills can we pick up right from here. Now the other thing that we've done is, you know, because there are 14 countries that we're serving, we like to integrate them into, you know, smaller groups, where each group has a representation of maybe 3 to 4 countries. And that gets them to really collaborate and to work together, even when they're away from the center.
One of the things that struck me is the fact that this center caters to YALI alumni from 14 different countries.
14 different countries, yes.
And so that gives one the sense that, you know, not only are they coming from diverse backgrounds, but also with diverse areas of specialization.
And you're right in saying that they've come from different backgrounds and different specializations. Though it's still around the three different sectors we talked about: public management, civic leadership, and business. But within those three, of course, there are people who are passionate about different areas. Now, in terms of how the center has been structured, it's just in terms of all of these little spaces and nooks and crannies that the participants can sit and engage in conversations. In fact, for us, what's powerful about the center is not the physical space, but it's the conversations that happen here. You know, I mean, think about young people from 14 different countries, as far as Central African Republic to Sudan. Think about that diversity, the different ideas, the different thoughts, the different backgrounds and experiences, coming together to learn together, to share, to interact, to help each other, you know, solve problems from the different communities. And so the space is structured around that. And one of the things that we've learned is the participants who teach us how the space can be used. So, you know, we configure the furniture in one way, but when they come, they shift it around to meet their needs. Yeah, and so this space really is theirs.
I'm seeing these boards here, and I read cohort 15, cohort 14. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
So every single cohort, when they get to commencement, we have this visual mapping exercise. So what this represents basically is the commitments that they have made in terms of what they're going to use, the lessons that they picked up from the center. So basically they're saying, this is what we're going to do with all that we've learned moving forward. So it's a creative, you know, inspiring way to represent those commitments. So instead of saying, this is what I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is how it's been done by some graphic artists who join us for every commencement. So we've got them from every single cohort, from cohort 1 up to cohort 15. And on Friday, when this particular cohort graduates, we'll have cohort 16, we'll have their map as well up on the wall. So to look at all these different artifacts, these are all from the different countries. And every time a cohort comes back, they return with gifts for the center. One of the things that we're working hard to establish is a space that's innovative, creative, and that also leverages technology. And so what I'd like to share with you now is our 3D printers. So we have 3 3D printers. What this helps our participants do is they can actually print out, in quotes, you know, physical models of whatever solutions they come up with for their projects. Yeah. So they print out using the spools of plastic thread, and then end up with 3D models. So we are working to incorporate this even more in our curriculum. One of the key programs that we run here is design thinking, and we'll be using this as part of our design thinking process.
The design thinking process, can you give us a bit of depth on how that works?
Yes, design thinking is based off of human-centered design. So it's basically saying how can we create solutions that meet the specific need of the target user. So a lot of times we come up with ideas of maybe good products, but as whether those products actually meet the need of the targeted user, that's in question. So we've had participants who've come through the program who, as they've sat through design thinking, they've actually remodeled their businesses because they've realized the solutions they came up with, it was just the idea, but there's actually no need on the ground. So design thinking takes them through the process of brainstorming, ideation, coming up with many ideas, and then going back into the field, right here on campus, to do interviews and to collect data and come back and again make some tweaks and come up with a prototype, and then end up with a solution that actually works.
One of the realities that confront is that there are so many young Africans out there. So many want to have this opportunity, and so many realistically will not get this opportunity. Can you give a sense of how many out of the many that want to be here, how many actually get to be here, and what would you say as a major leader in this program, what would you say to those who are on the outside looking in, who hope to have an opportunity like this?
You're right in saying that there's a large number who would like to be here. Let me just give you some statistics. During our last application cycle for our cohort 17, 18, and 19, about 270 slots in total, we had well over 5,000 applicants from the 14 countries. So you're talking about 4,730 people who wouldn't get a chance to come to the center. That's a huge number, and that's been replicated over all the past 2 years. Those are the realities that we face. In fact, that's a reality that caused the centers to be established, because when we're talking about maybe 50,000 applicants for 1,000 Mandela Washington Fellowship slots, there's just a huge number. Like I was saying, a drop in the ocean. You don't need to come to a place like this for you to grow as a leader. What you actually need is your own personal determination and drive. Now, this is a wonderful opportunity. It's fully funded, it's fully sponsored. We take care of all the costs. We host you while you're here. You get to network with participants from 13 other countries in the region, and that's wonderful. But that doesn't stop you from growing on your own. One of the things that we like to tell individuals is, your growth as an individual is your responsibility. YALI serves sub-Saharan Africa. And so the 4 centers serve sub-Saharan Africa. So we've got one here in Nairobi, which serves 14 countries in Eastern Central Africa. We've got one in Ghana that serves Anglophone West Africa. We've got one in Senegal, in Dakar, that serves Francophone West Africa. And then there's one in Pretoria in South Africa that serves the Southern African part. But they also have a satellite campus at, I believe, in Maputo that serves the Lusophone, the Portuguese-speaking South Africans. So that's where the 4 centers are. Now, each of them has taken a different approach in terms of curriculum, in terms of how the center is structured. But all of us have the same intent. It's transforming Africa's leaders. At present, we're running 9 cohorts a year, and each cohort has approximately 90 participants. So we're currently in our 16th cohort that graduates this Friday. And up to cohort 15, we've got 1,289 alumni spread over the 14 countries. So every single country that we serve is represented. And these alumni, what's also really powerful is these alumni are organized in country chapters, and we've got 13 of those already established.
4 different regional leadership centers across the continent. So many applicants, so many alumni, so many who seek to be a part of this. What would you say to the organizations, institutions, both public and private, across the continent about the role they can and should play in terms of providing opportunities for young people who don't have the chance to access this kind of an opportunity?
First off, let me start off by appreciating those that have already plugged into such initiatives, because we do have several, and we're sitting right in front of logos of some of the companies that have supported this initiative. And so let me start off by just appreciating those that have already put their money where their mouth is. But what I would say to other organizations is it's high time that we as Africans took ownership of such initiatives. We are raising leaders for this continent. We are raising entrepreneurs. We're raising politicians, future politicians. We're raising civil society activists and leaders, and it's for our benefit. These are the people who are going to be employed in those large organizations. These are the ones who are going to create new innovations that are going to radically alter the landscape of Africa. So we need to put in money to invest in such initiatives. But one of the questions that we've always asked ourselves is, and that people have asked, is, are you a training facility? Are you a youth development facility? Our response is always, we are a leadership development program. Slight difference there. So whereas we've got participants from the 3 sectors, private sector, public sector, and civil society sector, our key focus is leadership development. Now, here's what I mean. We are keen to develop leaders of those sectors. So it's not, we don't want to create an expert in the private sector. We don't want to create a public management expert, civil society expert. No, we want to create a leader in that sector. So what we work to do over the weeks they're with us is to elevate their thinking to the point where they start to realize that I can influence my sector. So it's not about my business and how to do bookkeeping and how to sell and how to market and how to structure my business. Now we talk about some of that, but the idea is, how can I go back home and radically transform the private sector? How can I deal with vices like corruption and all of that? How do I radically uproot those things? Public management, same thing. So we don't want to make expert bureaucrats or expert government employees or expert politicians. No, we want to raise their thinking to the point where they realize I can and I must transform that sector. So that's really what we're about. It's about transforming those sectors. So we don't want them to be leaders in their sectors, we want them to be leaders of their sectors. And there's a slight difference. And that difference is what makes our approach very distinct. Because when everybody comes in, we look at them and we tell them that they're leaders. And our expectations of them are high because they're leaders. So we challenge them, we push them, we hold them to a very high standard because they're leaders. And lastly, because they're leaders, our expectation of them as well is when they go back home, they must then influence others, they must raise other leaders. So what I like to say is, we're not teaching these young people how to fish. We're teaching them how to go teach others how to fish.
Mr. Kamau, I just want to say thank you for hosting us in this Regional Leadership Center, and I wish you the very best in all of your future endeavors with the young people across East and Central Africa. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come and for sharing our story. Thank you.
Please don't think that this isn't a call to action. It is a call to action. And please think about
one of the founding architects of the Young African Leaders Initiative, Chris Runyon, sheds more light on the program.
Even in this sub-region, we are a 14-country family.
We know that this has been a priority now for the United States government for a few years. What is the perspective or the assessment of the United States government about the role that this program can play, not just in positioning African leaders individually, but also positioning Africa in the global community?
One thing I would say is about YALI. There is an architecture of it and sort of three main components. So the Mandela Washington Fellowship, which a lot of people are familiar with, which is a wonderful part of the program where we bring people to the United States for training and then provide them support, be that mentoring or coaching or practicum opportunities in companies or in organizations, is one component of that. Another is the YALI Regional Leadership Centers, which was bringing YALI to Africa and establishing places where this same type of inspired training could take place here in Africa to a much larger group of people for a lower cost per person. And was really a result of the kind of response that we had for the Mandela Washington Fellowship when it was first conceptualized. And then the third I'd cite is the YALI network, which is predominantly a virtual network, but is growing increasingly into a network that also gets together in person in Africa. And that includes hundreds of thousands of young African leaders who are making change in their communities, but may not necessarily have the ability or the time to participate in either the Mandela Washington Fellowship or to be able to take weeks off of work to be able to come to a regional leadership center training program. So those are three parts of the program I just want folks to understand. But to your strategic question, what's the relationship here and why? I think the most important part is Africa is dramatically important to the world. It is an amazing place of diversity, of resources, of talent, of potential, and the world wants to interact with Africa. And I think that was really an engine behind creating these programs in the first place. And YALI is an umbrella set of programs that includes all those pieces I just mentioned. So the engine behind it was a desire to really deepen the relationship between the United States and the US people to young leaders. And this dynamic, amazing generation of young leaders who, of course, because of mathematics, will be the leaders of the future, but they're also leaders of today. And if the United States could play a role in helping to turbo boost them or provide extra skills that might not be as easily or readily available in African contexts, we wanted that opportunity. We obviously want to be able to demonstrate the fact that new trade relationships, new business relationships, new partnerships, intellectual or otherwise, are created between American citizens and young African leaders through this program. And there are stories like that, which show that a business has partnered with a company in the United States as a result of the fact that somebody went to the University of Wisconsin in Stout, or at the University of Delaware, or something like that. So when the fellows come to the United States in particular, they have really unique opportunities to engage with the American private sector. And so I think that's one piece. The other I would cite is even in non-business relationships, but in nonprofit organization relationships. I'm aware of several examples of cases where fellows have come to the United States. Through their program, they've met people and networked with companies and organizations in the United States, nonprofits, community organizations. They've picked up techniques and ideas and suggestions, and similarly, they've left ideas and suggestions for American organizations to use. I'm very proud of the fact that major U.S. universities and colleges in the United States have seen how YALI worked with the Mandela Washington Fellowship and the great experiences that a lot of young leaders had in the United States. And they said, well, this can't end with that. We want to scale this up, and we want to do more, and we want to help do it in Africa. So we've received a lot of inquiries, and we've had specific activities that have taken place here because U.S. universities and U.S. organizations and U.S. companies have said, how do we become part of the regional leadership centers? One example, Dartmouth College had trained in business and entrepreneurship in the United States for Mandela Washington Fellows, and was so fascinated with their experience that they galvanized a team of professors and staff to come here to Nairobi. And they've been coming here training in business and entrepreneurship skills and in design thinking, which is a really innovative, challenging way to think differently about your problems and your issues in order to make a venture successful. There is a lively, prosperous, amazing Africa that many people don't know. And I would certainly encourage more of the world to better understand that Africa.
Mr. Runyon, we know that much of the leadership crises, particularly in the African continent, have to do with stagnant leadership, leadership that perhaps lacks vision. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, when we talk about young African leaders, this YALI initiative, why is the United States so keenly interested in investing in young African leaders as opposed to just maybe African leaders of all ages?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ajuri. I think as we've seen, in some cases, Africa's potential is held back by some of its leaders. And that lack of inclusion of young people, that lack of representation of their interests, really creates a disconnect between the state and the people. And that doesn't help us all achieve the kind of progress and potential that Africa holds for itself and for the world. It hinders progress in political rights, in human rights. It hinders the ability for Africa's economies to grow with regressive policies. And it certainly doesn't help to create the Africa that we all know exists, the one of entrepreneurship, the one of energy, the one of engagement, the one that loves to learn and engage with the world and share its amazing lessons. And so closed societies or societies that prevent that voice from getting out are things obviously that the United States doesn't want to see continue. This generation of young Africans offers an opportunity to engage with a fearless, energetic, creative demographic that is intent on making the type of change that they see and that they envision for Africa. And so the role that the United States can play, even a small role as part of their journey to leading this continent, we want to play that role.
As the regional summit concludes, he answers a question on the minds of young leaders. I've had the privilege of going into the communities of some of these young African leaders, and I have seen firsthand the impact, the intellect, the drive, the passion of some of these young people in impacting their communities. And one of the questions that arises is, how does the United States government, how does the program work in such a way that these young people can utilize their passion, their intellect, and all of their intangibles to be able to break in to positions of authority in both the public sector and private sector at a leadership level, given this very troublesome trend of youth exclusion across the continent?
Yeah. Well, I think great question and a complex one. But I would say, first of all, I think increasingly there are global standards of youth engagement and youth inclusion. There is a recognition globally that if you leave youth out of decisions, it's going to result in bad policy and bad outcomes, both for government, for the economy, and for the young people themselves. That doesn't mean this is still going to be easy. This is going to be challenging. It's going to be very hard. And I tell you, many of the successes that our young leaders that we've been able to work with through YALI face a lot of challenges when they come back, especially the Mandela Fellows who go to the United States. Many of them return extremely energized by what they've experienced in the US, and their minds swimming with the tools that they've acquired that they want to apply in the African context. But sometimes they hit a wall. They hit a wall that doesn't allow them to engage, or they hit challenges of corruption or nepotism or closed systems that they have no access to. And it's very discouraging for them. The most important ingredient, the antidote in many cases to those problems, is not just the burning fire within some of these young leaders who have made a lifetime commitment to make positive change, but I would argue it's the safety net. And that is the network of people who they build relationships with, both through the program and then beyond the program. So I think for anything like what we're trying to do, or other types of youth empowerment and youth engagement programs, you need to have a strategic approach. You need to have a long-term view, and you need to stick with your plans. And then you need to make sure that the enabling factors around that young leader who may be struggling with these issues like we've talked about is able to overcome fear, is able to overcome setbacks, is able to ask for help, and is able to feel like they're part of a bigger movement.
It was absolutely eye-opening to hear of the different accounts of young people who drove change in their communities, often in the face of repression and other various forms of systemic inertia. Furthermore, I come away with a better understanding of how important it is to stay encouraged, motivated, and determined, even when it appears that your efforts are failing or that your efforts are not being recognized. Many of the YALI Network alum were denied before they gained access. When we strive and refuse to yield to frustration, success is inevitable. Next week on the program, we head back to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where we meet one young woman who has taken it upon herself to provide educational resources for victims of Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria. Join us right here next week for her inspiring story. My name is Ajuri Ngilale. Until next time, lead where you are, and followers will find you.